What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Stochastic.com MLB Strategy Show. Man, we've done you guys dirty the past couple days starting late. I promise it's not intentional. Blame it on Jordan Klein for being in Hawaii. That's how I see this. But nevertheless, we are here. We are talking baseball, 12-game Tuesday slate. Very happy to have you guys with us. Dave Loughran at Laffy_D on the Twitters. Josh Engleman had prior engagements this morning, but fret not. We got Matt Bellman back in the house at Fantasy Tips. Matt, breaking it all down with us today. What's going on, dude?
Nothing, man. How's it going? How's your weekend?
Good. I just took a nice long vacation down at the beach, and I'm feeling good. Can't wait for football, though. I'll tell you that much.
What's coming? I mean, you don't have to wait much longer.
I don't. How you doing? How you feeling?
Feeling good, man. Excited to get on here with you. I wasn't sure who was hosting, but then I remembered it's pretty much always you hosting in the morning. So excited. Haven't seen you in a minute, so I'll break this down with you.
Absolutely. Guys, you're in. I can't tell if it's your internet, Matt, if it's your mic or something. A little choppy here. Let me see here. Hold on. Maybe it'll clear up on us. See if let me see if chat's saying the same thing or if it's just on my end.
Tell me if it's my end, because I'm not experiencing any of that.
Okay, might be on my end. Let's see.
Tell me if it's my end. I'm not experiencing any of that.
All right. I mean, it's not great. It's not great, but it'll be fine. All right. Anyway, let's start it off. Let's start it off in the big way. Before we get into these games, Chris Williams. I saw the email that you sent in too. Appreciate that. Very kind. $100 super chat out of the gate from our friend at Apple Corporate, Chris Williams. First off, I will super chat more and massive membership gift once it hits my account. But you guys are the best. First of all, you don't need to, but greatly appreciate it. Split first with only two others on the DK late slate. Screen name is It Hurts So Bad. Took home nearly $11,000. Your knowledge is second to none. I have atoned. That's amazing, man. Congratulations. That's awesome.
That was a sweat too. I played a little bit on the late slate, and I saw he was grouped with like Shrek, I think, and one other person, and they stacked the Dodgers against Arizona, and like a couple other people were coming up on him hard with Dodgers, with different Dodgers. So glad to see he held on, man.
I guess Kyle Harrison was in that lineup.
Yeah, he was in every.
What a
I had a sweat without Harrison and without the Braves until Acuna went absolutely apeshit. I had a couple Houston lineups with Rodriguez and Wu. Houston looked like the nuts until Acuna did Acuna stuff.
Yeah. Acuna, what was he, like 4 for 5 with 5 RBIs?
Yeah, he had 51 DK points.
I mean, it's not great. Is this just my audio or Matt's audio? You guys got to let me know so I can try and fix this. If it's both of ours, then it could be on the production end. But, oh, yeah, 2 stolen bases as well. That's insane. All right, let's dive into this while we wait. Yeah, Matt, your connection stinks right now. I'm not sure what can be done about it. Just hope it gets better at this point. Are you on Wi-Fi or are you wired in?
I am on Wi-Fi, but I have like a extender right next to my computer.
Okay. You in a different location than usual?
No.
No? All right. Try closing out
my
all
wife
your
is
other
home,
crap.
so I'm seeing if she can do anything to help me out here.
Yeah, just try closing out any other any of the other crap that you don't have. Let's get into this, or that you don't need on your computer. Maybe that'll clear some things up. But for the time being, let's dive into this. The White Sox and Baltimore, plus 190. White Sox on the road. Jesse Schultz, Dean Kramer. By the way, Grayson Rodriguez. That guy's coming around, man. Starting to see it. But now it's Kramer and Schultz. I mean, I think there are going to be certain spots today where we spend a lot more time on than others. That is always going to be the case for a 12-game slate. Oh, real quick, though, guys. I almost forgot. I got flustered coming in here a little late trying to work through these issues. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. Almost 40 of you have already done so, and I appreciate you for that. hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below if you're listening or watching after the fact. And if you would like podcast form, we got you covered on all fronts, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Leave a rating, review there, subscribe to the pod. Maybe you don't want to listen with your phone open on the ride to work. You don't have YouTube Premium. No worries. Throw it in the podcast, close your phone, and roll. All right, let's go. Almost at 50. Like, yeah, we're going. We're moving. All right. So first off, let's start with this White Sox game. So we'll get to the bats in just a second, but I want to start with pitching. Schulten's getting 0 ownership. He is tied with Peter Lambert in Coors, who's facing the Braves, for the lowest ownership on the slate. And then on the other side of this game, Kramer is getting. What's that?
Is my internet, is that better now?
Yeah, we'll be fine. We'll be fine.
Okay. I'm like afraid to talk, but the fan was on next to me. I didn't even realize it because my headphones are in. So I turned it off, and I'm hoping that was the issue.
It sounds a little bit better. Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds a little better. Dean Kramer, 13%. Only 7% top 2 pitcher probability in the top stack pitchers tool, but he's mid 7K in a good matchup against the White Sox. Do you like any pitching from this game?
Yeah, I think that Dean Kramer looks good here for sure. I'm surprised he's like this far down in our top pitcher tool. You know, it's a good matchup. He's not like crazy expensive. I think this is definitely a slate similar to last night where spending down on both your SPs isn't the worst move at all. There are cheaper guys that are getting more love. You know, Cole Reagans, obviously, we'll talk about him. I'd be surprised if he's not the highest owned pitcher on the slate.
Knew that was going to happen. You guys telling me it's fine. I could have called that shit from a mile away. You guys telling me it's fine. I could have called that shit from a mile away. Nolan, did I not see that one coming? All right, well, let's see if we can get him back on. I mean, he's fine. No issues at all. Yeah, now you're back, Matt. All right, well, let's see if we can get him back on. We're going to – can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right.
Did
you
I
just froze up for like
a minute?
Yeah, for like 30 seconds. Back to the White Sox. We're going to get through this one as quick as we can. Back to the White Sox and the Baltimore Orioles. Bats and pitchers from this game. Anything stand out in the big way in this game?
I think Baltimore looks really good here. Similar to last night. Schlotten's is not good. Baltimore's second in our top stack tool, you know, way behind Atlanta for obvious reasons. They're also not getting nearly as much ownership. So as a pivot off Atlanta, I think Baltimore looks very good here.
Yeah. There's also a few pitchers that, like, all right. But you know what? I will bury the lead here, and we'll get to them in a second. There's a few pitchers that just seem wildly underpriced to me in their respective matchups, and they're going to pull like all of the ownership. Here's thinking about calling an audible here and us breaking this down almost positionally and by stacks to make it make more sense. Don't worry about it, Matt. Connections get bad sometimes. It happens to me as well. But I think it might make more sense on this slate just to do it that way. Make it easier for us, make it easier for the audience. So I'm going to call a pivot on this, and let me just see if this works. I also want to get your opinions on certain spots that I think are more interesting than others. So appreciate your guys' understanding. Don't forget to got the deeper dive today. We have live before lock. Deeper dive is game by game. That's at 4:45. We're going an hour and 15 for that. Got another hour coming up for this 12-game slate for live before lock with Greg and Neil. So let's look at this. Let's take this a different approach on this. I want to throw some cheaper pitchers at you and get your thoughts on these guys because some of them just seem wildly underpriced to me. Cole Reagans has been fantastic. I know he's had a couple of rough starts, but this dude's been absolutely stellar. He's going up against Pittsburgh. I know they don't have the highest K rate in the league. Understandable. We have him with a very low top 2 pitcher probability, but at the same time, $6,000 for Cole Reagans. The dude has racked up monster strikeout games And then you have guys like Alex Cobb as well. Another one against Cincinnati in San Francisco at arguably the best pitcher's park in baseball. We can get the guys like Jose Quintana and some other cheap options. But how are Alex Cobb and Cole Reagans not just going to be massively popular, probably paired together a lot, because you've got Atlanta in Coors Field today going up against Peter Lambert?
Can you hear me?
I got you.
All right, cool. I mean, that's what I was trying to say when I got disconnected earlier. I apologize about that, guys. We had a bad storm here the past couple nights, so no excuses. I'm just not sure what I can do right now. That said, I really like Ragans here. Alex Cobb also too cheap. I mean, Ragans, I'll be surprised if he's not the highest owned pitcher on the slate. Great matchup, way too cheap, really high strikeout upside. He's like arguably, he doesn't have a track record for it, but you could make a case he could be 8K here. So, he looks like probably the top pitcher on the slate, price considered. And then I don't feel as good about Alex Cobb, but man, the Cincy lineup strikes out a lot, especially on the road. Matt McClain out on the IL, so he only looks better there. I understand why that's going to be like the quote unquote chalk pairing. You've got George Kirby up top if you want to spend up a little bit, who's in a great spot, but those two guys at their, respective price points almost takes, it's nice that they price the Braves up to give people a decision, but when they make, pitching options this cheap, it's not really much of a decision anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So now you're just going to see massive ownership coming into Ragans and Cobb, which isn't even wrong. Like Reagan should be, Reagan should be a popular pitcher tonight at $6,000 against Pittsburgh in a park that suppresses home runs. Alex Cobb against Cincinnati, we saw what Kyle Harrison did. Now, I'm not saying they have even remotely similar strikeout upside, but Alex Cobb is a solidified. He is a good pitcher. This guy is not a bad pitcher, and now he's got a pretty appealing matchup. It's hard to get away from that. I mean, how much of, and I'm going to pull the lineup generator up here in a second to see if we can. I'm curious to see what lineups are going to look like. How much do you think you're going to see? Not only how different do we need to get today, knowing that the Braves have 27% top stack probability. Yesterday was around the same. 18.9% aggregate ownership on this stack. Number one stack score on the slate in our top stacks tool by a wide margin. And then Ragans and Cobb are both 30+% at sub 7K. What are ways to get different on this slate? Can it be, all right, I want to go Braves, Ragans, and Cobb, but still get different elsewhere? Or should you be looking to switch things up in other areas that could give you a little bit of leverage over a very weird slate?
So I do think that, Ragans, Cobb, Braves will be really popular. If you want to play that and just go over the field on all of them, I get it. Before I say that, I want to touch on Cobb and Ragans real quick to your ultimate point. These guys are sandwiching Corbin Burns. Corbin Burns is in the middle of them as far as top two pitcher goes on the slate. Ragans is 6th, Cobb is 8th. That's price agnostic. So not even considering how cheap these guys are, they're top, they're two of the top 10 pitchers to finish top 2 on the slate. They look, it makes it too easy. So it's going to be the Braves with those two pitchers is going to be very popular. Not going to be surprised at all if our ownership shows them with positive leverage right now, only getting about 18.6%. Wouldn't be surprised if that's closer to the 26.6% that their top stack percentage implies. The ways to get different on this slate are, for me, Atlanta looks so good here, but there's still other offenses that are in great spots that I just can't help but to think would be getting a lot of love on non-Atlanta and Coors slates. So again, it didn't work last night. Got burned by Acuna going for 51. I was close though. Baltimore had a good night. Houston had a real good night. And there's other offenses like that tonight. And the thing about using those other offenses is when they do beat the Braves, your path to the top is clear. I mean, even with the Braves last night, you had to nail your secondary stack. You had to nail your two pitchers. You had to go Harrison over Wu was big, even though Wu was really good. So, I prefer the easier roads to the top. That said, I mein, listen, the Braves are an historic offense. They're facing almost an historically bad Colorado pitching. Colorado, all of Colorado's pitchers are awful in Coors. it's really hard to get away from them. Because when you say you take the field over them, it's like you still have to get the team you're playing right. That said, MLB will MLB. So I think the way to get different is to maybe look at a couple of these other offenses, but certainly you can look at other pitchers. Are there any other guys standing out to you?
Well, let's get into it. So, I mean, Reagans and Cobb obviously make a lot of sense. George Kirby's got Oakland today, and that's always going to stand out to a lot of people. Now, obviously, the price point there is a whole lot different than you're getting with those cheaper options. But man, if you couldn't ask for a better matchup from George Kirby, a guy that can pitch deep into games. Recently, he's kind of been all over the map, and that's slightly concerning. 9,700. He's up $1,000 from his last start, but it does. What do you think? What do you think of going with some higher? Like, is it practical for us to get to some of these higher priced pitchers tonight? And the ones I'm talking about, not all of them are in great matchups. Pablo Lopez is 10-8. He's got Cleveland, not particularly potent offense, but a team that doesn't strike out frequently. Lowest K rate in the league versus righties. Corbin Burns at Chicago. That game does have a 7-run total. Cubs at 3.8 implied right now. So fine, 10-6 there. Kershaw against Arizona. Kirby against Oakland. Steals up to 9,500 against Milwaukee. And then rounding out that range is Merrill Kelly against the Dodgers at 9,100. So there's a big price gap between Kelly and Lopez. But are there any of those high price guys that you think you're going to find ways to get a lot of? Because Kirby's getting a lot of that ownership, followed by Steele, who's at like half of his ownership, and then it just falls off a cliff.
Yeah, I think Kirby's the clear guy here. And I know that you pivoted because of my internet issues, but I actually think this is a really good way to break down this specific slate just because of how it breaks down with the Atlanta and the cheap pitching. So
it almost does make more sense that we just lucked into it. Yeah.
I don't mind it at all. Again, hopefully my internet's better now. My wife.
It sounds a lot better.
All right, cool.
What'd she do?
That's what I was trying to say this about Kramer when you first brought him up and I had the initial problems. I was surprised when I saw it that he wasn't higher in our top 2 pitcher tool and he wasn't getting much love, but it just makes sense because you have Cobb and Reagans. And the thing about the expensive pitchers here, it's definitely not viable in cash games. Like in cash games, you're playing the cheap guys in the Braves. In tournaments, I would love it to be viable, but out of these top guys, none of them are in great spots, as you mentioned. We don't even have like the, Spencer Strider today. Pablo Lopez is probably the closest thing, but he's not that guy, and he's facing Cleveland, as you mentioned. Kirby is easily the top spend-up option. He's not even 10K. He's only 9,700, gets that cake Oakland matchup. I think that he's going to be the third guy to get ownership because you can make like a Reagans Kirby lineup and still stack Atlanta. Your secondary stack's going to be a little bit weaker or less expensive, but you can still make that happen. Same with, using Cobb with Kirby. I think optimally right now, though, like in cash, and if, you're just playing the numbers, it's Reagans and Cobb and stacking Atlanta.
Yeah. If you're going, let's say, and you discussed this a little bit, but let's take a different approach on these top tier pitchers. So like, let's say you do want to go with some of these higher price pitchers. Foregoing an Atlanta Braves stack can be ugly, but maybe it's a lineup that has, 2 Braves or something and not 5. You're 2-offing the Braves or something. So you're still getting exposure to the highest implied, close to 8 implied total on the slate. But maybe you want to be different with pitching because it's not like Cole Reagans and Alex Cobb can't, put forth underwhelming efforts today. What do you think are some of the best stacking options to pair if you wanted to go higher price at pitcher? Because that could make you pretty different in a lot of ways.
Will definitely make you different in a lot of ways. It's going to take a lot though. Just because I don't know. I agree with you. There's definitely many scenarios in which both Cobb and Reagans fail here. There's also scenarios though where they like score as much or higher than the high priced pitchers on this specific slate. That's why I think it's hard to get rid of them. If I were to do that, I think San Francisco is a team you want to look at. Kansas City at home against Luis Ortiz. maybe the White Sox, Pittsburgh, I guess, against Reagans, especially if you're not using Reagans, that makes even more sense. They've got some guys that can hit lefties, at least a couple, like Brian Hayes, Brian Reynolds. That said, it's not only that Atlanta's expensive. There are other expensive offenses on the slate. Like DK is priced up pretty much everyone. It just seems like it's only Atlanta because they're crazy expensive. We never see guys as expensive as Atlanta, but other teams are still like priced up. So I just don't see a scenario where I spend up on two pitchers today. Could it work? Sure. I struggle to see that path being the winning path as of right now, at least.
Yeah, I get it. I do. Well, how realistic do you think paying up for one pitcher and then going cheap at the other? Like, I think I would assume the Kirby and Reagans or Kirby and Cobb is still going to be an extremely popular pairing.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't be surprised if Cobb is like, right now we have him the most owned out of those three. It's with like a percentage point all around, though. Wouldn't be surprised if he comes in as the least, because I think that Reagans looks the best on the cheap end, and Kirby does look really good, at home against Oakland. Certainly much safer than those cheaper options. I think the ownership will be split between those three guys, but wouldn't be, shocked at the end of the day if, Kirby and Reagans is the most popular combo.
Okay.
Because like you said, you can easily make it work. Like maybe you can't use the 5 most expensive Braves and get whatever other bats you want, but Reagans is so cheap. He allows a lot of flexibility within your lineup.
A ton. I mean, what do you think he should? And by the way, for those of you guys jumping in late, welcome. We were having some connection issues earlier, so we decided to go and break this slate down a little bit differently than game by game, just to make sure that we could get you guys all the information and not run into any issues later in the show. Deeper dive live before log, game by game, all that good stuff coming up later in the day on top of it. So hopefully this does enough. I think it will. I actually think, as Matt pointed out, this approach works for this type of odd slate with Coors and two wildly underpriced pitchers. What do you think a reasonable price point on Reagans is right now? It's got to be like mid 7K, honestly.
I was gonna say, and again, I'm like mortified that my internet was having so much issue. Like you said, it happens to everyone. But as I was saying when you first asked me about Kramer, you could make a reasonable case right now that Reagans could be, he doesn't have the track record for it, 8K plus, given how he's pitched this year, the matchup, how DK's been pricing guys. Like he is. I mean, if he were 9K, he'd be in play here. Like, I mean, he maybe not look like, the best pitcher on the slate, but he would certainly be in play. I think you can make a case he'd be in play if you were even higher than that. So, yeah, it's not like he's impervious to getting hit. It's Cole Reagans. We've seen it before, but he's in good form right now. And his strikeout upside alone gives you so much leeway. Like if he does get hit a little bit.
It's a lot. Yeah, a lot. So, I think looking at the rest of these pitching options, ownership is funny today because, boy, does it thin out. You've got Cobb, Kirby, Reagans up there at the top. Steele is another one that I want to get into. Like him and Quintana are two weird plays today because Steele's basically the same price as Kirby. Quintana is basically the same price as guys like Reagans and Cobb, kind of with those two bookending him. Then there's Kramer, we talked about already at 12%. Jose Berrios at $8,800. And all of that's there. But then you've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 pitchers under 5% ownership. And then just a trio of them, 3 of them in between like 7 and 10 or 7 and 9. Sorry. It really is, 3 pitchers far and away the highest owned. And then you just have a handful of pitchers in Steele, Quintana, Kramer, Berrios, Morton in Colorado that are getting some love, but not a whole lot. Are any of those guys too over-owned or under-owned that you think we should be getting more or less of?
Not really. And I'm not even going to be surprised if in higher stake stuff last night, Grayson Rodriguez was 58% in like the 888. So I'm not going to be surprised if we see Cobb, Kirby, and Reagans like all above 50% in like high stakes, at least all above 40%. Wouldn't be surprised at it at all. This slate is not quite, but almost identical to last night. And it worked last night. Like the cheap pitchers pitched well. the expensive offenses, aka the Braves, went off. So, it's almost like, why fix what's not broken? And the top tier pitching on last night's slate, you had Gaussman at home against Washington. He's elite, but not an elite spot. You had Snell in St. Louis. No one that like people were really running to jam. And I think you see that tonight, except for Kirby. So Kirby will come in a little bit more owned than Gaussman last night. But I just think the optimal way to go, and even getting different on this slate is probably playing different offenses, just because I think the cheap pitchers are, specifically Reagan's, is way too cheap.
So do I. God. So, all right, then what's your, if the slate starts now, let's say you've got 20 lineups, let's just say.
Okay.
How much exposure are you getting to the Cobb, the Kirby, and the Reagans, and then everybody else? Like, are you getting majority those guys?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I played it last night where I rated like 5 lineups last night. I used Rodriguez and Wu in all of them. I could see myself doing something similar here with, I think Reagan's is the guy for me right now. Like, he stands out way more than Cobb and Kirby to me. So like, he's the guy there. Maybe if I were playing 20 lineups, maybe I'd make like 10, whichever one I liked better between Kirby and Cobb, as I look at it more, 10 of that guy and Reagan's, 5 of the other guy and Reagan's, and then 5 of those 2 guys together. Is something I would look at right now. I'm just more comfortable. I'm definitely more comfortable, especially in baseball, fading the highest owned slate or the highest owned stack, even on a slate like tonight. I know that Atlanta is in such a good spot. And if our tools are correct, they look elite. I just know from playing and the nuance that goes into it, like Atlanta is going to be even higher owned than this in higher stakes. And like, at what point are they over owned?
So let's flip the page then. Before we do though, you guys already know Caesars has a promo that they never do. I've been doing this long enough. They've always had the first bet insurance promo today and ending soon. I'm not sure. I think it's like till September 18th or something. It's only a couple weeks that they're doing this. Bet 50, get $250 in bonus bets. Now, it's not like you're giving them $50 unless you're just betting it on something asinine to get $250. You're betting 50. So you could bet the 50 and win and get the $250. You could bet the 50 and lose. See, that's the good part, because if you bet the 50 and win, you're like, all right, whatever. I'm still getting $250, but I already made money on my initial $50 bet. But if you lose that first 50, then things start to look up even more, because you didn't actually lose anything. You're still getting paid out in $250 in bonus bets. Even if you're not an avid sports bettor, you should be an avid seeker of free money. And this is one way to do it. The link's in the description and in chat. You click the link, right? You click the link, it takes you there. Takes no time to sign up. You put your information in, you deposit. Using that link, you're going to get this offer. You put $50 down on a bet. Doesn't matter what it is, okay? Normally, and let me just throw this out there, when you have those others that are like bet 5, get 100, I would usually recommend just going with some crazy long odds bet, because the 100's coming back to you regardless. The 150's coming back to you regardless. With the 50, I wouldn't recommend doing that. Because it's a $50 wager. It's still significant enough to where you could place a sharp bet and make a good return on that without going with like a, 100-to-1 parlay. So sign up, use the 50, put the 50 down, win your bet, get your $250, lose your bet, get your $250. Football season is right around the corner. If there's one thing I could say to any of you guys, like those of you that have signed up maybe recently on DFS sites and gotten all your bonuses, or on pick'em sites and exploited and milked all of those bonuses across all of those pick'em sites that are competing with each other, these sports books, as the NFL season rolls around, are going to give you offers to compete with other sports books that are going to be better than any offer you will get all year long, no matter what. Football is the time to say, I got a little money laying around. let me spread it out and take advantage of every bonus on every book that I'm not on. Caesars right now, 50 into 250 is one of the best ones. So click that link in the description. And if Nolan can throw that in the chat, potentially, that'd be great as well. All right, let's talk some bats here. So, Matt, you've got Atlanta at the top. I think we discussed this a lot already. There are some other good spots, though. Like yesterday, you had Baltimore against Kopech. They had nine runs. I think only one home run, though, so wasn't going to win you anything, but a solid performance. The Astros put up pretty monster numbers. We've got them with the third highest top stack probability today. Looking at the top stacks tool, you've got Boston up there against JP France, San Diego against Zach Thompson. There are some other stacks that on any other slate, we'd go, hey, these are pretty decent. It's just today, everything pales in comparison to what Atlanta has to offer.
Yeah, I think that's like ultimately the kind of theme of the slate, the theme of the series, probably Atlanta in cores. I get excited about slates like this because, yeah, it's tough to, not play Atlanta. They look like they're in such a good spot, but you have this plethora of offenses that all look like really good. Like on a lot of slates, a couple of these teams would be like the number one stack on the board. You mentioned it. I mean, Baltimore, yeah, they only hit one home run last night, but Gunnar Henderson also stole 2 bases. And that makes Atlanta, just touching on them again real quick, even harder to fade. They run, and that just adds to their ultimate upside. I mean, Acuna's 2 steals last night. He stole a base when they were up 10-4 in the 8th. So he's not afraid to run at all. 61 steals on the year. It goes without saying they're the top stack on the board. Baltimore's coming in. Basically you have your pick of the litter in terms of under-owned offenses if you don't go to Atlanta. That doesn't mean that you want to or you have to fade them altogether. As you mentioned earlier, maybe you play a 2-man Atlanta stack. They're all getting ownership, though. So just know that going in. I think that you're going to be competing with too many people playing Reagans, Cobb, and or Kirby and the Atlanta stack. That's just me. The team that you didn't mention that I like a lot is Texas. I know Quintana isn't a guy normally that gives up a ton of power. I think this Texas lineup sets up really, really well against him. They're high in our top stack tool, not getting any ownership. Actually, they're the most leveraged team on the slate. This is a team that when they go off, hits home runs. Like Texas belongs in a group with all those other teams around them. They're a team that I'm eyeing in on right now, though.
Can somebody do me a favor in chat? Can you click the Caesars link either in the description or in the chat that we just posted in there and let me know if it takes you anywhere? Because I click it and my screen just like flashes.
I thought you were about to say something about my internet again, and I was going
to. No, you're good. You're good. We're past that. Now, if someone could do that for me, I just want to make sure that it's on my side and not somebody else's side. So let me know. Just one of you guys. I'm not asking you to put the 50 down. I'm asking you just to click the link and see if it takes you there. If it's just my computer or not. And also, B-Funk says it doesn't load anything. So thank you. That's good. All right. So who did you say? Sorry, I was trying to work. Who did you say the stack that I didn't mention was that you liked a lot?
Texas.
Okay. Against Quintana?
Yeah. Quintana's not a guy I go out of my way to pick on. He's not a guy that usually gives up a ton of power. This sets up as a really good spot for their lineup. His pitch mix, etc. When they go off, this is a team that hits home runs. They also run. They're the most leveraged team in our top stack tool. And just from a eye test sort of thing that, I'm not using them because of this, but just from watching them, this is a team that had lost 8 of 9 games. They were trailing the entire night last night. They were down 3-2 in the 9th. Bases loaded, 2 outs. Nate Lowe got an RBI single. They end up winning the game. I feel like that could be a springboard for them. And as I said, this is a team that when they have good nights, they hit home runs. So I'm not afraid of Quintana, and they're going to get absolutely no ownership because they're basically the same price as the Braves. Up top, Seager 6,700. So you're going to see him be 1/10 as owned as Acuna. And I get it. Acuna is the better play, but we're still talking about Corey Seager.
Another one too, man, Ken Waldichuk he doesn't inspire much confidence in many people. How much of this is, if this was at a different park, Seattle stacks are massively owned today? How much of it do you think is just the park?
I think it's definitely the park. I think Julio Rodriguez will get ownership though. He's been the hottest hitter in baseball, hitting over 500 in August, I'm pretty sure. So he'll get love. They are like getting, again, no one's getting ownership except Atlanta. But as far as our top stack tool goes, they are coming in a little bit over-owned. They've been really good. I think the park is what brings them down. They only get 8 at bats, assuming that they win the game, which, they're huge favorites here. The park is not conducive to big offensive outings. So that's the reason they're, not going to be higher owned. I think that's the reason they're probably only, 7th in our top stack tool. And you see teams like Houston and Boston ahead of them. I think that's the park speaking there. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're right. They are still getting like 7% aggregate ownership, which compared to the rest of the slate is significant.
And I will say, like teams like Baltimore last night, they ended up getting a little bit more ownership than I would have expected. I didn't end up seeing where San Diego came in, so that was a team that really let people down. And I'm sure they got a bunch of ownership as well.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I'm just looking at some of these other stacks behind Atlanta. Once you get down to some of these at the bottom, you're just not going to touch them. But do you think there are some contrarian stacks that are just going wildly overlooked today? And kind of attached to that question, when you look at our top value percentage in the top stacks tool, San Francisco against Brandon Williamson has the highest top value probability on the slate. That is significant because you see that usually tethered to the Atlanta stacks. Get in some cheaper bats that look okay. That's why San Francisco against Williamson, even in a garbage park for hitting, is at 6.5% ownership. That's why, Pittsburgh again has 5% aggregate ownership. Even Cleveland, against Pablo Lopez has 5%. Kansas City against Luis Ortiz, 8% ownership in that one. 5% top stack probability, 7.6% value. All of these teams among the top value stacks are going to get more ownership than they normally would on a slate where Atlanta's not playing in Coors.
Yeah, definitely. Those are going to be the teams that you can pair with Atlanta, because even if you use like the cheap pitching options, Atlanta's so expensive where you can't just stack them and use whoever you want. Like if you stack their expensive guys, you need some cheap bats with them. So I think you nailed it right on the head. Kansas City, Pittsburgh, San Francisco to a degree. I think San Francisco will probably be used more as one-offs. It's hard to stack them on big slates like this when they, use their platoon advantage to like an extreme. So like their top guys, Wilmer Flores, et cetera, who aren't that expensive, they look great here. It's hard for me to want to get on board with the full stack though, just because of what I said and the ballpark, as you mentioned. But yeah, I think that we see like the ownership's going to be flooded to Atlanta and those cheaper teams you mentioned. I can't help but notice, and again, I wouldn't be playing them if the slate started right now, but it's the same thing the top stack tool has said yesterday and the day before. Houston is like so high, and Boston's right behind them. These are teams that maybe they get a little bit more ownership than they did last night, especially Houston after how they performed, but they're still coming in, with leverage as far as our tools say, and they're about as expensive as the Braves. So I just can't see them getting like any ownership at all. It's surprising to me that those two teams are so high in our top stack tool.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially because it's not like either of them are facing total gas cans.
Right. France got absolutely shelled by Boston in his last start with like minus 17 DraftKings points, something like that. I don't know if he made it out of the second inning. So, maybe Houston gets a bump because they just destroyed him. It's just surprising. Like you said, like Bayo's been good. France has been really solid outside of that one start. I mean,
outside of one start against Boston, France has been spectacular.
Right. Like he doesn't strike out a ton of guys, so he's not a guy you love for DFS purposes. It's just like you look at Bayo in France and how many shitty pitchers there are in this slate. I'm like, why is Houston and Boston so high?
I don't know. I do not know. And at that rate, I mean, it feels like you would just want to stay away from it.
Same, but I will say last night, Houston, I think, was third facing Chris Sale. That's ultimately what got me on Houston. They were coming in with so much leverage. And I almost took, like, when I made a couple of Houston lineups, I was like, almost like, pretending I don't know baseball. Because on paper, why are you stacking a really expensive Houston against Chris Sale? But like, it ended up almost shipping everything. I know Atlanta went off, woulda, coulda, shoulda, but Houston was really close. They've scored 13 plus run in some back-to-back games. Again, I'm not going to be playing them right now. I respect Bayo, but our tools say Houston's probably them and Baltimore. Baltimore and Atlanta look so good in our tools right now.
They really do. But I mean, I don't know. I'm looking. Okay. So let me ask you this. Would you rather, if you're going away from Atlanta stacks, would you rather have like Houston and Boston stacks? And it's not to say that both of those teams don't have a ton of power and a fantastic offense. But if you're going away from Atlanta, would you rather have Baltimore against Jesse Schulten's, San Diego, Texas, or Houston and Boston?
It's definitely the other teams, not Houston and Boston. I think we see this very similarly. It's like we know Boston and Houston are good. On any given slate, they can win the slate. But those other teams are facing pitchers that, are either unproven or are proven to be garbage. So, yeah, I think Baltimore looks far better than those teams. And I would, I think Baltimore is the second best stack on the board. I think, the only reason ownership won't be there is because they're also quite expensive. So this is a fun slate, and it kind of shows in our top value percentage. The only teams with really like high top value percentages are San Fran, as you mentioned, Pittsburgh, and Kansas City. Cleveland a little bit too. There's a lot of expensive teams on this slate.
A lot of expensive. I mean, look at the top value. If you sort by value, there's really only like 4 or 5 teams that grade out with really solid value. And most of them are just not very good, or they're in just bad parks. You look like some of these, no surprise that got the Cubs, already an expensive team in a tough matchup, are getting no ownership. The Dodgers, expensive team, getting little ownership. Like, are there any expensive good teams that aren't getting ownership that we should be looking at? Because we talked about the expensive teams that are getting ownership that we don't really love. What about the ones that aren't getting ownership, might not be in the best matchup, but are very good offenses? For instance, a Dodgers type team.
So I think Houston, they obviously stand out in that regard. They're not in a great spot against Bayo, but our top stack tool loves them, and they are elite. I mean, their lineup looks good right now too. You're seeing the ball well. Alvarez, Altuve's red hot. He hit for the cycle last night. And then for me, though, the one I keep going back to is Texas. They're also really expensive. Simeon is more expensive than Albies. As I mentioned, Seager is $6,700. Adolis Garcia is $5,700. So, like, this is a team that's going to get overlooked just because of their price tags and other teams you can get to at those salaries. As I mentioned, though, this is a team that, like, hits home runs. They run. I think the breakout game's coming for them. The Mets bullpen stinks. I like Texas here as a, low probability, really high upside team that when they go off, like, you're not fighting with anyone really because no one's going to roster them.
You know what I'd like to do here? I want to get your final thoughts on a couple things. And by the way, appreciate you guys bearing with us today. Started late, a bunch of different stuff. You're the best. Hit that thumbs up too. If there's 10 of you, potentially 10 of you, maybe Nolan, who's producing this show for us. Appreciate you, Nolan, or Matt, if you haven't hit that thumbs up yet. Let's get us north of 100 here on a Tuesday morning. And remember, deeper dive live before lock coming up later in the day. We got a whole lot of stuff on the channel. But maybe if there's 8 more of you to get us to that number, we'd be in good shape. And we can keep this one rolling. So I want to pull the lineup generator up. And I want to take a look at what that's giving us. What we can do is, because in the lineup generator, you can see the ownership. You can see how chalky and contrarian every lineup is. You can see the optimal projection. You can lock players and swap players. We're not going to do that. We're going to see what it gives us because we already know that it's given us plus EV lineups. It's spitting out all of the garbage, all of the shit, getting rid of all the bad lineups after simulating thousands of lineups behind the scenes. and giving us the best lineups, the plus EV lineups. So I'm not going to mess with it too much. You always can. If you think some of the exposures look crazy or off, or you wanted to get something, you can always make some tweaks and swap players out or lock a player in. That works. But once you're done, and you can set your stack types as well. I'm going to set it to all stacks. I'm going to go DraftKings main slate, and then I'm going to go all lineups as well, right? I'm not going to lock anybody. And then we're just, because you can discard the lineups you don't like. You can go through as many as you want, and save the ones you like and then upload them to CSV. By the way, it's $4.48 for the first week. $4.48 for the first week. And if you've seen the screenshots recently, you already know the power of this tool, especially if you don't have a lot of time in the day, or you're just someone that's like, hey, I play low stakes. I love this, but I want something. I want to build better lineups in this low stakes or the 3 max or the 20 max. I want something to build me better lineups. This is the way to do it. So Nolan, this is what we'll do. Let's just save the first 20 lineups that we come across, right? So skip that. Skip locking a player. We'll save the first 20 lineups. Go down and just save them real quick. Save 20 of them. Then it'll take us and we'll get to see all of our ownership, all of our exposure, and all these lineups. Yeah, let's do that, Matt. So I'm going to do the same on my side. I want to get your thoughts on what some of these lineups look like going into this slate and see if this is all right. So, dude, all right. So I just saved 20 lineups. Cole Reagan's 90%.
Yeah, I mean,
that's great. Now, the one Nolan did is Cole Reagan's at 65%. So let's look at that. Acuna 7K at 70%. Just a ton of Braves, as it should be. Cobb at 30. Steele at 25. Scroll down a little bit. Anything stand out to you here if we're looking at this, Matt, on the screen?
I mean, Williamson at 25% stands out a little bit. He has pitched well, so no, I guess that he's a guy we didn't talk about as like, if you want to play Atlanta and get different, like where are you going to go? He looks like a guy you can go to. He's priced in between Cobb and Reagan's 6,500. He is in good form. Our top pitcher tool doesn't love him, but they're going to definitely have to take some risks if you want to get away from the chalk pitching.
Clayton Eskew, lineup generator is great for slates like this. Have to stop yourself from tweaking it. Yeah, that I think people go in and they just make a ton of adjustments and wonder what's going on. Well, you just built your own lineup with a lineup that was generated. Nolan, go to stack exposure in the top right over there. Go to the right, stack exposure. Atlanta 55% stack. How about that, Matt? Kansas City is 25% right now. Exposure of the 20 lineups that we have going up against Luis Ortiz in Pittsburgh. San Francisco at 25%. Looks like just a ton right now, at least. And we just saved everything. We didn't discard. Atlanta, Kansas City, and San Francisco getting a whole lot of them and a lot of Cole Reagans and Acuna.
Yeah, it's exactly what we said. Not surprised by it in the least. I think that's like where you want to go in cash games for sure. In tournaments, it's a risky fade. I just love slates like this because I still can't get over, Acuna is probably the best hitting play on a slate, like it's in terms of raw projection. Last night and tonight, we've seen all year, leading off in cores against garbage pitchers. It's still like, how many times does Acuna have a 0 here? 20% of the time? 15% of the time?
Yeah. Or even what if you were to
go 10 or under?
That's what I was going to say. It doesn't need to be a 0 at $7,000.
Right. I mean, even if he hits a solo home run, like you need more, you want more than that at 7K because you're paying a pitcher's price for him. So again, he's the best, hitter on paper that we'll probably see all year, but that still doesn't take away from the fact that hitting is really hard. And, more often than not, hitters are going to get out. Again, it's really tough to think that way on a slate like this, but it opens up like so much of the field. And all you really have to do is like get by Atlanta. Easier said than done, of course, but that's kind of how I'm thinking about it as of right now.
Yeah, he would be the 15th highest priced pitcher on DraftKings today if he were a pitcher.
Yeah.
Which means 15th or 16th. There's 9 pitchers cheaper than he is. It's crazy. if
he's
you
going to
were,
be the most expensive player in a lot of people's lineups just because they're going to use Reagan and Cobb.
Right. That's a good point. How often do you see that where your most expensive
Never.
player is an outfielder?
I can't remember seeing it like this where, these guys got priced up really, really expensive. I can't remember prices this high, to be honest.
If you were to make some swaps here, like let's just say you wanted to, you like I said, I usually wouldn't recommend.
I wouldn't, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, like what I don't recommend is making wholesale changes. If you wanted to swap out one batter for the other because you think you have too much of them, you know what I mean, or you want.
Sure.
I understand all of that. What I'm saying is just going insane and using it to build your own lineup, like you would just go into the DraftKings on desktop and do in the contest.
I mean, what are we doing?
Right. If you were to swap out some players, though, or swap in some, forget about who you're swapping. If you were to swap in some, maybe it's a few specific hitters that you don't see a lot of exposure to here. And you wanted to get a little bit of exposure to them in 20 lineups, even like 10, 15%, right? Like 2-3 lineups, or maybe a pitcher or so that you don't think there's enough of that you'd like to get to. Is there anyone that stands out looking at these exposures that you'd like to get a little bit more of?
Not really as far as like exposures go, just because I feel like exposures in baseball are so tied into stacks. So like if I say a specific hitter, it's like, most of the time that's going to be because I like their lineup.
Right, like now, a Texas hitter or something. You're going to want Texas stacks. Yeah.
Are there like certain exceptions? Sure. Like I think that, Gabriel Arias, even against Pablo Lopez at 2,100 is an okay hitter to get to as a punt play. Same for Gabriel Moreno. But like those guys aren't guys I'm like, oh yeah, you got to put Arias. You know what I mean? Like, no.
It makes sense. 448 for the first week, or we still have a month of baseball left. We mentioned it the other day, but all of our baseball stuff, like we talk about top stacks, top pitchers, those tools, those incredibly powerful tools. We just saw the guy tweeted us yesterday, took down the 5K with those, just using the top stacks tool, which was awesome. Lineup generator, projections, ownership, premium Discord, all of that for the entirety of the week. If you go into the description, you'll see 50% off first week, any weekly subscription. If you just did baseball, it's less than $10 for the entire week for every tool, including the lineup generator. So it's that plus everything else, which you're getting all of that other stuff for what, like $5 or something on top of the lineup generator. So play it however you want. A la carte 448 or the Platinum Weekly MLB get you down there for a huge discount. I think it comes out to like $9.90 something. So, and you can always DM me too on Twitter at Lofty_D if you have questions. My DMs are open. But appreciate you guys. Listen, game by game later today. I think we broke this down as well as we could have, Matt. Honestly, there's a lot of just mess on this slate that probably doesn't need to be touched on. I think from top to bottom, we covered most of this on what direction is right to take with a slate like this with Atlanta and Coors.
Same. I'm just thinking about like specific games like we didn't really touch on, like Washington at Toronto. Like there's how many 13 games on this slate? You're not going to be able to play every spot. And there's going to be just when you have Coors, especially a team like Atlanta and Coors, there's going to be a lot of spots that just aren't going to need to be talked about because to get different on this slate, you don't need to go to like the 6th, 7th best teams because the 3rd, 4th, 2nd best teams aren't getting a lot of love because Atlanta's getting so much. So just presents a different dynamic. Again, it was my bad. I hope it got better as the show went on, but I think we're good really now. Well. All right, cool. I think we broke it down really well. Sometimes a slate is better broken down that way, to be honest, in my eyes.
Absolutely. Hey, appreciate you guys. Follow Matt at Fantasy Tips Matt on Twitter, me at Lofty_D. Thanks to Nolan for jumping in and saving us here, producing this show. We'll see you guys back here tonight for Deeper Dive live before lock, and then back here Wednesday morning for the MLB Strategy Show. Appreciate you guys. Later.